Welcome to the first show of 2020 and to another episode of the Health Mastery Show. I'm your host, as usual, Adam MacDonald. In today's episode, I have on with me a very special guest. It is my personal coach, Jeff Alberts. Jeff is a pro natural bodybuilder. He's a coach at 3D Muscle Journey, who I have been a client of for a number of years, and he was my coach for the last few competitive seasons. I got to spend a lot of time with Jeff this year, or last year now at this stage, but I got to know him a lot better as a person. Spent a couple of days with him at an Airbnb at the Worlds, but I learned a lot from Jeff over the years working with him. When I first began, I think I was around 22 years old, now 27, 28 very soon. And Jeff taught me a lot about how to play the long game and enjoy this long term in bodybuilding, because if you want to be a good natural bodybuilder and make progress long term, you're going to have to learn how to not burn out and how to be consistent and take enjoyment from the process. And that is exactly what Jeff has taught me over the years. But I don't want to talk too much more about it. It's a great conversation between myself and Jeff, and hopefully you learn something from this and you enjoy the show. And if you do enjoy it, please do leave a rating and review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever it is that you're listening to. And if you have any questions, please do reach out. But without going on anymore, please welcome my next guest, Jeff Alberts. So Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's great to chat to you again.
For sure, man. It's definitely, we had a great season together, so I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, for those listening, Jeff, you've been you obviously know, but Jeff's been my coach this last competitive season, the previous competitive season, which was 2016, and I think we first Skyped, I believe, which was in 2014. I think it was a long time ago, but that's when we first actually Skyped together. So that's that would be almost, what would it be, 6 years ago, whenever that was, but 2014 was quite a long time ago.
That's crazy. It's gone so fast, and what's kind of cool now is that we can kind of say, hey, it's grown into a friendship, so that's really awesome.
Yeah, and this season I got to compete on the same stage as you twice, which was really, really cool. First at the Muscle Mayhem in California, in Sacramento, down your neck of the woods, and then just last month, it seems like more than a month ago, but just last month at Worlds. So that was really, really cool experience.
For sure, and I think the highlight of all that, Adam, was that I'm going to say that I was the sock sliding champion.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. I don't know, nobody probably knows what you're talking about, but in Amityville, that's right, yeah, mm-hmm. Amityville's the place. Yeah, we, after some food and some extra energy, we had a bit of a sock sliding competition between myself, yourself, and Eric. So yeah, I think you won.
I think I did. I know Eric's probably going to say he won because he thinks he wins at everything, but no, man, I think I got you guys. And sock sliding is basically on your socks on a hardwood floor, seeing who can slide the furthest without falling on their ass. And I do think, Adam, you fell right on your ass. Or was that Eric? That was Eric.
Yeah, and Eric was kind of in the heavier weight class as well, because he was he pretty much had 10 kilos, like 20 pounds on us, because he was like, post-season or post-contest.
Well, that's an advantage in sock sliding when you're heavier.
Yeah, so his momentum took us.
And he still didn't win. So, hey, there we go. But anyways, let's get to the other finer things in life besides sock sliding.
Yeah, I think actually, well, just going back to, I think that the Mayhem for me was probably the highlight of my competitive season this year. It sounds kind of, people will think that the Worlds would be the highlight, but for me, it was like getting to compete on stage with yourself. I hadn't met you since 2000 and... I don't know when it was previously before that, but I think it was maybe in London. That might have been 2016. You did like a conference or something like that with Shredded by Science. I think PT Collective now. Do you remember that?
Yeah, we did a seminar there, and I do remember meeting you there for the first time. Yeah.
That was quite a long time now. So it was great to meet you again. But then when I first saw that Eric was competing this season, I didn't know he was going to do the Mayhem, and I was like seeing pictures, of course, of him on social media and stuff, and then I was like, oh, he's shredded. And then when I was like, if Eric wins his pro card in I think it was the River City Classic or the one before that, I was like, if he wins his pro card there, then he's going to be a pro at the Muscle Mayhem. And then when he didn't win, I was like, it was kind of bittersweet, because I was like, damn, Eric is like shredded, but also I get to compete on stage with Eric, which was like, in the same class. Like, obviously we got to compete on the same stage, but not together. But to go head to head with Eric was awesome, and it was just a really, really great experience at that show. And yeah, that was just a highlight. I don't know why. I guess because, like, California, the weather is like amazing compared to where I live. It's just always raining, has been raining pretty much since I left California. And it was great to like do a whole road trip up there and then compete at the end and like meet all the 3DMJ crew and everybody. Got to meet all the coaches that were there as well. That was awesome, and it was just really enjoyable experience. And one thing that I kind of learned or was different this time was that I said it to you before, that it didn't really matter too much to me how I placed per se, but it was like the day before the show or when we were meeting, or even before the show, before we got the results, I was enjoying it just as much as I did afterwards. And it's kind of easy for me to say that because I actually did well, but I think going back, and you'll probably notice this when we first start working together back in, let's say, I think we maybe did some off-season coaching back in 2014. I can't really remember, but I always wanted to kind of get result. Like, I always wanted to just be making progress and wanting to see that progress all of the time. And I think if I would have competed back then, and I actually had competed before, the year before that, but if I was competing that season, I think I would be more focused on the placing and that being a determining factor of how well I felt the season went or how much I enjoyed it. And I personally feel like just us coaching together over the last few years, you've really, I suppose, paid some of your wisdom onto me, or instilled it into me, and let me take a lot more from the bodybuilding prep than the ultimate result itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that show was definitely, for me too, was like one of the more highlights of the season. It's just the environment there, the Muscle Mayhem. It's kind of like a 3DMJ party. We have a lot of athletes there, and, we kind of represent more than just, hey, how well we play. So I think it was just that environment, you traveling over, from Ireland to here, and it's definitely an experience in itself right there. So I think, it just had a lot of value outside of just the placings. And trust me, man, as your coach, and knowing that you and Eric were probably going to be going head to head, that was pretty stressful for me. It's like, who do I go for? Do I go for my athlete or go for Eric? It's like, so there's some pressure there. And what's interesting, it was a good pressure though. Like, it was an exciting pressure. And what's interesting is I see your progress coming in every week, and you're getting like leaner and leaner, and you're looking better and better, and he's looking leaner and leaner and better and better. And I'm like, man, these guys are like almost like similar statues. You guys are, about the same height. Your build is very similar, and the musculature is very similar. So I'm like, man, this is going to be close on stage. It's going to be a battle. And that's what it was. So it's kind of cool, kind of like when I got to see you both on stage and cheer for both of you. It was everything that I expected and predicted. I was like, this is going to come down to the wire. It's really not apples and oranges, but it was like really, really close. And it could have gone either way. And for those listening, Adam, you got the nod. Definitely you deserved it. And but it was like really close. So it was really cool to kind of see that, but it was kind of nail biting for me as being your coach. Yeah. And even Eric and I are, joked about it after, like, or even like before, hey man, mess his peak up, stuff like that.
Yeah, you sabotaged. Yeah.
Yeah, but of course, we weren't going to do that. But yeah, for me as as your coach, as Eric's friend, and it was kind of just cool to kind of witness all that. And then what's really cool is that, for Worlds, we got to kind of meet back up. You stayed in our Airbnb. You got to hang out with Eric and I. And again, it's more like we were built like a friendship. So that was really, really a special season from all that aspects. And I think for you personally, like being your coach, like seeing your prep, 3 years ago in comparison to now, I think back then you were, I would say it's kind of cool that you and I kind of hooked up. Like, I can see if maybe you had a different coach who was a little more science oriented, where sometimes, like, if you have two of the same together, it's not a good match. Whereas if you have kind of opposites, it's kind of a good thing, because for me, I think personally, and you can maybe, me talk more on this or not, but I think what you learned from me was how to let go of some of that stress, as far as trying to be optimal all the time, where sometimes when we overanalyze or overthink things or trying to be super, super perfect, it creates a lot of unnecessary stress, and sometimes that stress can get in our own way, and it just makes us a little more neurotic, and the journey itself isn't too enjoyable because of that, because we're always worried about if we're doing things right or wrong. And when the season's over, you look back and go, why was I so stressed? It wasn't as enjoyable. So I think that's probably like the big picture thing I could probably say that I think I've probably taught you the most. The X's and O's and the science, I mean, you're good at really researching and learning things on your own, but it was more like taking you through a process and finding value outside of those things. I think was probably the main thing I can say that I probably taught you.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, I think I found a 3DMJ through a friend of mine who I did like a photo shoot with when I was like 19, so that was 2011, I think. And Harry Ranson, he was one of Eric's clients, and then I think I've maybe heard of 3DMJ maybe again through, I think it could have been Matt August's channel. I don't know if I've heard of 3DMJ before that, but then I really do like the science, and it's not that you said that it was an unimportant, or it tried to instill that it's the thing. It's like the science aspect of it is important. Actually, I still really enjoy it, and I actually started a master's in it this year. But what I realized was that when I first applied for coaching with 3DMJ, and you probably get this a lot from people who are like me, who would like really like the scientific part of the training nutrition. They're like, oh, they want to join with the science guys, right? So they want to be with Alberto, or they want to be with Eric, because they're the science guys, right? So they, at least young guys or people who are overly invested in the science, think that that's what they want. But I think it was like almost like a blessing in disguise that you and I hooked up. Not that you don't know the science, but you have that wisdom that obviously comes with time, competing and just working with clients for like many years. Having done this, I think you said, I listened to one of your podcasts, the Natty Roundtable this morning in 1993. So I mean, I was 1 year old in 1993. So so I think that was like a blessing, and for anybody listening, I don't think it's that element of it isn't important. It's just that's like the 2% of what's going to get you the result, is overly focusing on that and trying to be perfect in those kind of things. And that's the way I was trying to be perfect with anything. And I remember when I met Eric again in New York, I think he used to have a 3DMJ Facebook group. I don't know if it's still active. I don't think so, but he said like, oh, I remember Adam, we used to post like really long, obscure, hypothetical questions and tag me, and he's like, oh shit, not Adam asking another question again.
You would basically, I remember, because you would ask me in our check-ins, and I would say, yeah, but let's not focus so hard on that, this or this, and then you would go in the Facebook group and tag Eric, and Eric would be just like, you need to chill out, basically, in so many words. I think I've pretty much, like, questions I would ask, right? So people say, well, doesn't matter if you have, like, let's say more calories on your training day, and then lower it on your off days, okay, something like that. So people would, you would see people doing things like that. So I would then take that to an extreme and say, well, if that doesn't matter, what happens if you only eat all of your calories in one day of the week and then don't eat for 6 days? I was like, well, like, that's really black and white, but maybe that would have an effect, but who does that? Nobody. So there's no point even asking those type of questions, So they're the kind of things that I would ask that are just like really obscure, and I would like focus way too much on things like that, and realized, and I think we spoke about this as well, I think just when we met last month, but that
you kind of have to pay almost your due diligence and pay your dues with that, and kind of experience it and realize that. And the way I realize is that that's not important is because I try to do it and time just passes by as it naturally does for everybody, and I realized that focusing on that stuff was just stressing me out. My results weren't getting any better, and just focusing on the big picture was ultimately what gave you the results. And between my first prep with yourself in 2016 and 2019, I didn't really focus too much on the sciencey sort of stuff, and to be honest, I got a little bit burnt out after that prep, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do bodybuilding again. Like, I didn't hate it or I didn't have an awful time. I just felt like maybe I'd try to invest too much into like the outcome per se, and trying to like think of that's what would make me ultimately happy and fulfilled. Yeah. And after a while, I think I even tried CrossFit for like 3 months or something like that, and yeah, it was just awful. But I didn't really focus too much, and at one point I was didn't do any extra reading, watching videos and training or anything like that for a couple of months, and then I'm back on the stage 3 years later, and my physique is massively improved. I'm 10 pounds lighter but look a lot more muscular, and it really showed me that focusing on just the things that are the big rocks is what's ultimately going to get you the results. And you're probably, I don't know if you're the oldest on stage at the Worlds, but I think there wasn't many guys around your age that are on stage, so that's obviously a testament to something. So why do you think that there's not many bodybuilders that last that long? I mean, yeah, there's guys who compete, but there's not many guys who are competing at your age at such a high level. So why do you think that you've been so successful on a consistent basis for decades?
It's interesting because when you kind of were just talking about all that, it was like I was flashing back to my youth, and I think when I look back when I first started competing, my first year was in '93 when I first started competing, and I had a 3-year stretch, like '93, '94, '95. I competed 3 years in a row, and the fuel that really kind of kept me going 3 years straight, because basically it was like compete in '93. Boom, off season, hey, let's get big, let's improve, and then right back to, 94 for another prep. I did that 3 years in a row. And the fuel that was making that happen was just that desire to win. Like, I wanted to win a certain show, and I had my mind on it. I was obsessed with it in a way. And it was like, a lot of it was like trying to get external gratification, like having people say, oh, look at him, he won that show, he's jacked, he's shredded. So, I think my maturity level at that time wasn't, where it is now. So my fuel, I think, was like the wrong kind of fuel. And what ended up happening after 3 seasons back to back to back, I got burned out, like mentally. I remember saying after almost every season, it seemed like I would say, I'm retiring, I'm done. That was because of the extremism. So back in the day, I was kind of like you, Adam, where a lot of it was about winning. It was trying to be optimal. Like, trust me, I was a guy who I actually would read research stuff, and half the time I didn't understand what the hell I was reading, but I was doing it anyway because I wanted to optimize everything and be the best that I can so I could win these shows, to be the best. And I think it just burnt me out after 3 years. I was just like tapped out, just burnt out. And I remember after that 95 season, I was done with bodybuilding. I started playing a lot of basketball, playing a lot of tennis. Like, I got away from bodybuilding, which I think is a blessing in disguise, because it took that mental focus away from just bodybuilding, and I was applying myself everywhere else. And that kind of basically gave my mental a break, and I got motivated again for bodybuilding. So in '98 I came back to compete again, but I didn't really know, or I didn't really decipher all that at the time. I was stuck in the middle of that mentality and couldn't get myself out. Like, I didn't have a coach, or I didn't have anybody mentoring me. It was just like everything I did was self-taught. So I was stuck in this cycle of like, okay, 3 years compete, get burnt out, remove myself, take a break, get remotivated, okay, come back. And I just repeated that for like the first 10, 15 years of my career. And it wasn't until like now, obviously I can look back with 2020, hindsight, just helps you visually see things a lot more clear, that I was just mentally getting burned out. Like the physical was burning me out, which turned into mental burnout. And that's the reason why, man, it was like, I remember in 2002, that season, I was super, super laser focused on winning a pro card. And that entire prep, I think it was a 14-week prep, I didn't cheat on my diet once. I didn't miss any training session. Like everything was perfect. And I remember like from a social aspect, like, if my ex-wife wanted to go to dinner or something like that, it was, nope, we're not going to dinner because I got to be laser focused and I got to be on point with everything. And so in a sense, like everything outside of bodybuilding got put to the back burner. Like I didn't care. And it was a selfish, obsessive, behavior that I had that wasn't obviously very conducive towards a happy marriage or anything like that. So, for 4 months out of the year, man, I was just like this total dickhead that didn't care about nothing but bodybuilding. And I ended up going into that show and I lost by 1 point, missed the pro card. And instead of seeing the value from everything I did accomplish, all I saw was defeat and failure. And basically I remember, flying home on the plane, I was like, this is stupid. Why am I investing all this energy into this sport and to lose by a point? Like, and it's still, till when I look back on the photos, it's arguable whether or not I should have lost. Like I kind of still feel like I should have won. But so that kind of just reinforced that thought, like, this is dumb. I'm putting all this energy into it. I'm losing. I got robbed. And I ended up getting depressed, like, after that. And I said, what? I'm done with this bodybuilding thing. I remember going to, like, lunch with my dad, like, not too long after that. And I was just telling him, I go, I'm done. This is stupid. This is a dumb sport. It's, like, pointless, right? So I was just, like, in a very dark place at that point with bodybuilding. And it wasn't until 2009 when I started to see a little bit better light on things, like when I started to change my thought process around, hey, this season I'm going to come back to this and I'm not going to have like that winning mentality, like, yeah, I still want, when I'm on stage, let's try to win, but hey, let's actually try to enjoy what I'm actually doing, like the day to day. Let's enjoy that. Let's not put so much pressure on myself to be optimal. And long story short, I go through 2009, enjoy it. That's where I met the guys at 3DMJ. And at that time, it was the most enjoyment I've ever had with bodybuilding. And what's interesting and what's funny is that the focus wasn't on winning pro cards, but I actually won 2 pro cards with that mindset. So a lot of my history that I've basically have gone through, basically all those mistakes and what I've gone through, is actually that helps people like you, Adam, where I'm like saving you from, let's say, years of heartache. It's like, okay, let me use my shitty experience, but actually make it a positive with someone else. And I don't want to take back or regret any of what I've gone through. Like, I'm glad I did, because it's made me a better bodybuilder and coach now. And I think a lot of those lessons, like, I know they're so valuable now, and I think that's the, like, whether I'm successful or not in the moment, I know those valuables is what keeps me moving forward, and that's how I keep getting better. Even now into my late 40s, what's keeping me going now, like on a high level, like getting to worlds and 6 out of 14, that's pretty damn good for a 48-year-old, it's just all those life lessons. And I think mentally I'm a much stronger bodybuilder now than I was back in my 20s, and that's the reason why that's why I keep going. It's like I know myself really well. I know how to, like, decipher the lessons that I'm learning now, whereas in the past I didn't, and that just comes with experience. So I think that's kind of like a big tool for my longevity, is just the history and understanding that whether I'm successful in the moment or not, I'm making mistakes, like that's a lesson that I can use towards the future.
Yeah, I think the more you invest your identity in just like a hardcore bodybuilder, then the harder it is not to try and focus on just the outcome, because you're so invested in just the end goal. you're working, you're killing yourself or cutting everybody off, or being this tunnel visioned bodybuilder that's nothing's important except for the bodybuilding, then it's hard for the result not to have some form of impact, or not some form of impact, but a much larger impact than what's actually really important. Because I think when I've seen when I spoke to some other bodybuilders, even at some of the shows that I competed at, the Worlds, when I hear guys saying I've counted every single macro, or every single meal, I haven't taken one day off or whatever, you can tell that they're just like quote unquote hardcore, and then when they don't place where they expect to place, they're ultimately really pissed off, and it's kind of hard to watch that, because you can tell that they're not enjoying it as much. And so people say I don't compete to come second place or whatever, but the thing about bodybuilding, I think, compared to other sports, is that a lot of it's just based on a lot of it's just genetics and time. And I really reflected on the show, The Muscle Mayhem, after I won my class, and I was thinking I did better than I expected. But for example, like Eric, who's like probably one of the most well-known guys in natural bodybuilding, just purely for the content that he puts out and how he positions himself in the industry, that he has to have quite a mature mindset to be able to quote unquote lose to someone like myself, who's relatively unknown, and then not take that to heart, or to still be poised and have composure and take lessons from that. Because how do you balance the competitiveness? Because it is competitive natural bodybuilding. It's not just everybody goes on stage and gets a medal. It's not just participation. It is competitive. How do you balance that with not putting too much emphasis on the placing? Because with things like, say, soccer or basketball or boxing or something, there's a lot of different elements that can play, more so than there is in bodybuilding, where it's like, at the end of the day, someone who has better genetics than you, or has been training longer, or a combination of the both, they're gonna do well.
Yeah, you can't, like in other sports, like you said, like boxing, or let's say football or something like that. You can impose your will on somebody to win, right? You can knock someone out. You can out point them, jab better than them, and just you can basically beat them because you're just dominating them. But in bodybuilding, it's so subjective, right? It's like we all have different genetics, different shapes, it's just like, in the judges, we don't know what the judges are going to be looking for. So a lot of it's subjective. And, personally, when I'm on stage, I want to win. Like every time I'm on stage, like, hey, let me try to win and do the best I can here. But I think, over the years, I've learned that, I learned the hard way, man. It's like, that's kind of the story of my career, is I learned the hard way. So I can go back to when I was trying to win a little show called Mr. Fremont. And I remember back in 95, it was the last year they were having the show. So for 3 years, early on in my career, I was trying to win this show. 93, I was junior Mr. Fremont. 94, I won the short class. Then I lost the overall. Then 95, I was like, okay, this is my year to win this show. And I ended up taking second place in the short class, so I didn't even get to the overall. And I just remember walking off stage and backstage, I was like verbally complaining out loud that I got screwed, robbed. Like, because in my mind, because I was training so hard, like I felt like, hey, I'm entitled to this. Like I outworked everybody. You've probably heard that mentality from other bodybuilders. I outwork people. Like, maybe not. There's a lot of bodybuilders out there in the world that the guy that beat me, he might have worked just as hard as I did, if not harder. So maybe he deserved it more. But, after looking at photos, like, it took a while for things to sink in. Like, once I saw photos a month or two later, and my emotions died down, and I started looking at things more realistically, it's like, yeah, the dude had like 14 kilos on me. Like, he was just way bigger. Like, it was obvious. Like, looking at the photos, I'm like, Jeff, what were you thinking? But I think often, going through the process, like, we, in a sense, because we think we are perfect with hitting macros, perfect with cardio, or perfect with training, and we're not deviating, or we're doing everything to make ourselves the best that we possibly can, almost like starts to become like an entitlement, or we feel like we deserve to win. But again, when you get on stage, it's so subjective. Like you can let's say, and I'm pretty confident you can probably say, yeah, we maximized your physique this year, Adam. Like we did everything we could, and this is the best we've ever seen you. And same thing for me. It's like at certain points in my prep this year, this was the best I've ever been. So from the perspective of fulfilling your current potential, we did that. And in a sense, you won because of that. Because when you get on stage, it doesn't matter if the bodybuilder to your left or right, if they fulfilled their potential or not. If they look better than you, they're still going to win. So in my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, the judges are only going to see what's in front of them, right? Like visually, they're going to look at all the bodybuilders and go, okay, this guy's better than that guy, whatever. And that's just how it is. But the reality is what judges don't see, and what we don't see as bodybuilders, is that the people that you're competing against, you don't know if they fulfill their potential or not. So the guy that, let's say, looks better than you, but let's say he didn't even fulfill his potential, like you can kind of say like you're a better bodybuilder than that person, even though they look better than you, because you've done the process, let's say, a little bit better. But how do you know that? You don't know that. That's the thing. So that's kind of how I look at things. Like I've won shows where I've been at my best. I've won shows where I haven't been on my best. And the shows that where I wasn't, it's like, did I really deserve to win? Am I truly the better bodybuilder here? You know, like if I messed up on my diet a bunch of times, or I was lazy with training, like I could have probably fulfilled more potential out of myself. So even though I win, doesn't mean necessarily I'm truly winning, if that makes sense. So these are kind of some of my thoughts that I've basically have, figured out over the years. So for me now, when I go into a show, it's like, okay, the first priority is to fulfill my current potential. Not to leave anything to chance, because when I get on stage, it gives me the best chance to actually win, right? But actually, I know in my heart that I am my best. Like I've done everything I can to be my best, so I've already won. And if I can beat someone else, hey, great, that's just like icing on a cake. But if I lose to someone else, then it's like, well, as long as I did everything I can, and if I lose to someone, I'm okay with it, because that just means they look better than me on that day, and it's out of my control. So it's more like I try to look internally versus externally now. And I know that's not always easy to do for a lot of people. But like you, when I hear people say, like, I don't train for second place and all that, and it kind of just takes me back to 2002 when I talked about that prep where I lost, got depressed, didn't see any value in what I just did. And it's not until like in hindsight where I could actually say, okay, yeah, there was some value in that. And this year still, like we're 5 weeks removed from Worlds, I'm still processing the season. Like I think a lot of us, we kind of just put so much stock into that placing that's how we value what we just went through. Whereas I think now that I've gotten older and more mature, it's kind of like, you have your glass of wine with a meal. You're sipping that wine really slow and you're taking it all in. That's kind of what I do now. Like I just really take my time to kind of sift through and, see where there was value, where there wasn't value. And I just process it. I'll probably keep processing the season for another few weeks or so, or maybe even longer. And that's what I learned from Eric actually this season, like, because he finished his season before we did. So I got to hear how he processed, like, because we had our team meetings and he would kind of tell us things, as he was done with the season. And it did take him a little while to process everything, like process the man. Like actually, he wanted to win too when he was on stage and he didn't. So he had to process all that. So I learned from him to be very patient with that, like to let it kind of just come to me slowly over time. And so, yeah, so I've been rambling but a little while, but hopefully that kind of answered the question.
Yeah, I think it's important, and it's probably you being able to internalize that is probably one of the reasons why you're still around. from a mental aspect, not being burnt out, apart from the physical aspect of, you know, injuries or whatever that come with your training age. But that is something that I really, like I said, I really learned that this season. I think like it's different from, like, say, sprinting or something like that, where it's like you want to get, you know, under 10 seconds and the guy beats you by 0.001 of a second, and yeah, that's disappointing, but it's very objective. Versus like bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding, is almost like a painting. You know, you're doing a competition with art or something, and you put two paintings up against each other, and you feel like yours should have won, but because it's so subjective, it's almost necessary to be able to internalize that and understand that placing is not, you know, the most important thing. And that's kind of why I said I cringe a little bit when I hear those guys who are really focused on placing, because what I ultimately feel like is that if they keep that mindset up, they're not necessarily going to be around for that much longer, or they're going to burn out mentally from bodybuilding. Because if you're not placing well in bodybuilding, and of course your placings will get better as you know, if you're consistent and you do get better each time, your placings will get better. But if you're not, you know, clean sweeping the show, it's likely that you're not going to, you know, be the best bodybuilder ever in the world. If you were, like, some people ask me, do you think I can be like, they ask me about themselves, you know, do you think I have potential to be a good bodybuilder? And I think if you're going to be like a world champion, for the most part, you probably know already if you've been lifting a few years. For example, Kendall, the guy who won the pro overall, he's younger than I am, and I think he's been lifting less than I am, and he's a pro and he's winning the pro overall, and I'm an amateur still. And I think, but that's good to see things like that, because I know that, you know, winning or the outcome is not that important, and it's, to an extent, it's kind of out of my control. And like you said, it's about focusing on you know, trying to bring your best. I think I would have been maybe disappointed this season if, let's say, I, even in spite of enjoying you know, meeting everybody and getting to hang out with you guys a lot, I think if I didn't do better than my last season, I probably would have been a little bit disappointed. I don't mean placing wise, I mean just how my physique looked and how I felt as a bodybuilder. And I think you're dead right saying that I probably got the best out of my physique. Like, I definitely could have brought in a better package, but I think for where I am in my competitive career, I think every time you step into a new territory, whether that's like essentially a new level of leanness, that's like, you know, that's a whole different ball game, you know, mentally. And I think you have to get to this new territory in order to be able to go further. So next time I compete again, I'll know what that feels like now mentally. I'll be able to deal with that better, and then ultimately get better physique. Because I don't think anybody's comes in the first season, or it's very rare, where they're like the absolute most peeled with the most amount of muscle that they could potentially have from a very objective point of view.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, like, the way I kind of stress potential, like, people like go through a contest season, and let's say they're not happy with how they look. Let's say they look great, right? But they're just like, I know I have more in me, and they're never, like, not satisfied. Like, it's a double-edged sword. Like, on one side of the sword, we need to have that mindset to want to get better and to push ourselves to get better, because that's how we make progress. But on the other side of the sword, if we're never happy with what we got, it's like you're miserable, right? Like, you're not enjoying what you're doing. So the way I kind of describe it is, like, the goal should be to fulfill current potential. So there's a difference there. Like, having current potential means what you're capable of accomplishing in the moment versus what you're capable of accomplishing 5 years from now. So yeah, if every contest season say I wasn't good enough, yeah, it's like I said, it's that double-edged sword. But I mean, if we're in that mindset all the time, you're never going to enjoy what you're actually accomplishing in the moment. And if you're just saying, hey, if I don't have that first place trophy, that just reinforces that you're never fulfilling potential, or you're never happy with what you're accomplishing. So to me, it's like I've had to learn the hard way over the years. Like, I need to find value outside of a placing, and to realize that, again, if I'm doing everything I can be doing in the moment to feel current potential, then that's actually winning. So, you know, after this last season that I competed in, you know, even as a 48-year-old, I still think there's a little bit left in me to squeeze some more of that potential out of me. But I also realized too that I did everything I could this season under the confines of my prep, that I knocked it out of the park. Doing 7 shows, placing well, in almost all of them, and being like one of the older guys on the world stage, and still having the motivation and drive to come back again in 50. I mean, at the age of 50, the fuel is no longer, hey, I got to get first place. The fuel is like, I just had one of the best times of my life as a bodybuilder, and I want to do that again. So that's basically, I could say, like, a huge part of my longevity is, outside of like, making sure I'm training, in a safe way and that type of thing. But it's just the mental part of like understanding that a major part of the fuel, or the best fuel you can have, is actually enjoyment with your training, enjoyment with like how you set up your process and how you go about that process, and understanding that every show you do, it's not like for me personally, I don't let the judges dictate my success. I don't give them that power. Like, that power stays with me. I define my own success, and the show, I just look at it now as a celebration of my process. And that's the mindset I try to have. And like I said, when I'm on stage, it's like, yes, let's see if we can try to win. But I still try to have that healthy mindset around, the placings.
So do you feel like if you hadn't have done everything that you could have done, with the aspect, or with the kind of lens that obviously bodybuilding is not the most important thing, because I think there's ways that you can fulfill your potential. One is looking like a better bodybuilder, like either bigger, leaner, but also then perhaps getting to that same territory or the same level of physique, because you've mentioned before that you've had great conditioning in the past, like way back when you did shows when you were a hardcore strict bodybuilder, but you've been able to reach the same physique but with a lot less stress, a lot more enjoyment. So that's another element or lens to look through fulfilling potential, is getting to the same physique but enjoying the process much more, having a much smoother ride there, and not making bodybuilding the most important thing.
Exactly, because I would go back to my 2002 season where I said I ended up like being perfect but lose and then be depressed. Well, like what people don't see, like what a lot of people see, like especially on social media, is just, hey, look at so-and-so training, or look at so-and-so dieting, like they're shredded, blah, blah, blah. But what you don't see is, things behind closed doors. So in 2002, like I was saying earlier, like, I was an obsessive asshole. Like, my ex-wife, like, got put to the back burner. Relationships got put to the back burner. Like, everything was about bodybuilding. So yeah, I got shredded. 2002, I could say, like, I had shredded glutes back then. And I was the leanest one on stage on that show. And that's why I felt like, hey, I should have won that show, because I was definitely the leanest one up there. But man, it was like I was such an asshole. Like the way I went about my process was so inferior in comparison to how I do the process now. So now I'm doing it in a way where, hey, my family comes first. I'm not like there's days where I can't be optimal. Like, okay, I can't train today. Let's train tomorrow instead because of X, Y, and Z. Whether it's, hey, I have to be there for my family, or I got something else going on. Or, hey, I can't get my cardio in because of this or that. Or, hey, you know what? Let me eat 50 more grams of carbs today because my mind is just like, I'm an asshole. Like, I'm just like, energy is not there. I'm a dick, and I don't want to be a dick. So let me eat a little more food today so I can be more human to those around me. And, because of doing that, you think, like most people would think, oh, you ate 50 grams carbs more, you shouldn't do that. You're overeating. But if it means I'm a better human and I treat those around me better, I'm not going to get that backlash, right? Like, if you treat someone with disrespectful, you're going to get that back, and that's going to be stress on your plate. So in a sense, by eating a little more on a given day, let's say, my stress levels go down because of that, and it makes the process better moving forward. Like, it just makes me better, like mentally and physically. I'm like, okay, now I can get back to a little more grinding in a better state. So just like I said, like you said, Adam, there's so much more than just, hey, you place well, or hey, you're shredded. It's like the actual process. Like, for me personally, I'm trying to improve the way I go about my process every time. So in 2014, the last time I got on stage, that was my best ever physique at that point, and it was also the best ever process as far as balancing life and bodybuilding out. So this year I was like, hey, let me see if I can improve that. Let me see if I can even be more human during the process. And I'm still trying to figure out, like still evaluating whether I was better or not than 2014. And I think often, like, to get a true answer to that, like how well you're balancing life out with bodybuilding, is like ask those closest around you, hey, how was I? And really see what their feedback is, because truly that's where the answer is going to be, whether or not you were, a pretty good human during that process. But that's kind of my goal in 2021. Like, I remember Roberto saying, a few years back, it's like, hey, when I do a prep, I want people to not even know I'm prepping. Like, that's his goal, to like go through an entire prep where, people didn't even realize he was prepping. I don't like, as far as that being realistic, like, I don't think that's a realistic goal, but I think it's definitely something to strive for. So that's kind of how I look at my next season in 2021, is like, hey, let me see if I can maybe get back to Worlds or whatever shows I want to do. Let me see if I can, reach that elite level conditioning again, and let's see if I can actually do it in an even healthier way all around.
Yeah, I think there's probably a balance, and I think that's probably really hard to do, to let nobody know that you're prepping. I mean, from a mental point of view, obviously they're going to see that you're getting leaner. But for me, even though I tried not to tell a lot of people that I was prepping, purely just because I didn't feel the necessity to tell people who don't like bodybuilding that I'm doing a bodybuilding show, because they probably don't really care. But I remember towards the end of my prep, some people that I work with, they were saying, "Oh, you're quite quiet lately," or you're acting a little bit different. You're very quiet. You're like, and I could just tell that it was because, like, I just don't have the energy to be as bouncy or to be as energetic as I previously was, and that's kind of difficult as well. I remember just recently being in the gym, and a guy that actually he used to be a client of mine a few years ago, said to me, "Oh, during the last few weeks of the prep, you seemed very focused." But I wasn't really any more focused. It was just that I didn't have the energy, or I didn't really necessarily want to go around and talking to people all the time in the gym. And I think sometimes when you're just at the tail end of a prep, it's probably hard to be normal, to a point where you're just so low in energy and your body fat's low. Just from a physiological point of view, it's difficult to kind of maintain the same kind of characteristics that you would have had previously in the off season.
No doubt. Yeah, because I remember the tail end too. I'm aware of, how I am. So I know, like, towards the tail end of prep, when food level is not like where it should be, your body fat's really low, you're not going to have that energy. But I was aware of it. So, if the family's like, hey, we're going here, going there, yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to try to be present, but it's not the same, when you're not, energized, you're not jovial. So it's just, I'm aware of it, and I just tell myself, okay, don't be moody, don't act moody. It's not about me, it's about them. Try to do your best to be present. But again, like what I learned like a week or two after prep, after getting, eating more calories and the body weight start coming up, my energy just instantly starts popping up. And, my wife would say, oh, good, it's good to have you back. You got energy. So I know it's like, okay, they're still feeling the impacts, even though I'm not, being a dick or anything like that. It's like, it's still not the same. So that's why I say I don't think it'll ever be realistic to think that no one would ever notice, that I'm prepping. Like, they're definitely going to notice, whether I tell someone or not. They're going to know something is off about me. And that's just the reality of the sport. If you are a bodybuilder and you do plan on competing, that's part of the process. But it's having, again, that mental awareness of how you are, like of how you're being. Like, if you feel yourself being moody and grumpy, you have to learn how to tone that down and put a smile on your face regardless, because you don't want those around you that love and care about you and supporting you. You don't want to treat them miserably, through a process. And what I've learned too over the years is that getting shredded for shows, like the timeline keeps, like, it seems like it just keeps getting longer and longer because the standard of conditioning in this sport has elevated. And I think a big part of that is because of the timeline now. Like, people are dieting longer, so they're getting leaner. So if you're going to spend 6 months to a year in a contest prep, that's a big chunk of your, like, it doesn't seem like it's a long time when you're going through the process. Like, personally, like, you're like, okay, yeah, this is what I need to do. But think about the people around you that have to endure 6 months to a year of their life dealing with a dieting bodybuilder. Like, there's a lot there. So for me, it's like, okay, now that my season's over, that's why I'm like, part of the reason why I'm taking 2020 off is like, yes, we need time to recover and all that. But again, being 48, I've already trained for over 30 years, so I have enough muscle mass to compete every year if I wanted to. But, one, it's not the healthiest thing to do, but I don't want to put my family through more prep. They've already gone through 14 months of it, so why am I going to have them go through even more of that? Like, they deserve to have, like, all of me again. So I think, again, and that's part of my longevity too, is realizing and understanding that not just bodybuilding itself takes its toll physically, mentally, emotionally, but the life stuff, like, that takes its toll too. So if you're putting a big toll on those people around you, I'm pretty confident that stress levels are pretty elevated, all around. So that's the reason why I'm like, 2020, hey, let's be a little fatter and let's be a little happier, and we'll do this again in 2021 if the stars are aligning.
Yeah, I think like, then on top of that, if you're like one of those real hardcore bodybuilders like you said you were back in the day, like, you just compound the negative effects on top of that if that's what you're if you're like that.
Yeah, I would, like, right now, like, let's say we go Jeff of 20 years ago, like, after my season, after Worlds, fuck, I got 6th. What, are you crazy? We got to get top 5, and no, we're going to go right back to the gym, and hey, we're going to train for 6 months, and then we're going to prep again. And I wouldn't even think about, like, the people around me. Like, no, I'm just going to do what I need to do to win. Like, it's just the all black and white mentality. And so, yeah.
And then just shit talk the WMBF and then join a different organization and compete with them until you win.
Right? Yeah. So it's just the all around, like, it's just, like, there's a lot that goes into the sport outside of, like, hey, the science says this or science says that, or hey, I need to win at this show. Like, there's so much more that I think that we need to take into consideration. And a lot of this, like, the way I'm talking now, like, I didn't know this 20 years ago. It's just the experience. Like, when you go through things, especially if you're open, like, your walls are down, like, you're not putting walls up, you put the walls down, you're able to learn a lot more if you let kind of that ego, go down. So that's I've had to learn the hard way, but that's the reason why we could sit here and talk on a podcast all about it.
Yeah, I think that there's actually a really good it's kind of like a mockumentary, like it's kind of like a drama, but it's also a documentary. It's called Dennis. It's about like this I think like Scandinavian bodybuilder. He's like a huge jacked guy, and he's like really strict, but like it goes into like his life. He has like no friends. He has like he's never goes on dates or anything like that, and he's just like really sad. It's a pretty sad documentary actually, but like it just goes to show like how isolated he is, because he's like just bodybuilding. That's all that's important to him. And I think that those people who often do are like really hardcore and do compete year after year, usually they're not natural bodybuilders, simply just because they you can't make any progress and you can't recover. But those who do, they're almost like in relationships or marriages where the other person is also a competitive bikini competitor or bodybuilder, because they're the only people who'd really like put up with you, because that's what they that's what all they know as well. And I think that's a little bit sad, but I mean, it's just kind of the reality of it.
Yeah, no doubt. Like, I remember, like, my wife now, like, we've been married for going on 4 or 5 years. We've been together almost 8 now. And I remember I was just like, when I was like getting back out on the dating scene, I'm like, I am not like Brad. I remember Coach Brad, he's like, hey Jeff, I can see you with a hot figure girl. And I'm like, no offense to figure girls or anything like that, but that's just not what I wanted. Cause I'm like, I can't see myself like having two dieting bodybuilders in the same household. I'm like, there's just no way. So that, yeah, I wasn't really looking for, someone that was involved like that heavily into the sport like I am. I just knew that kind of wouldn't be a good match for me personally. But yeah, I think, my wife, she's very supportive. I think it's important to have that support. But again, you're not going to have that support if you're not treating your significant other the way they want to be treated. If it's all about you all the time, like I learned that the hard way. And yeah, she's very supportive. I told her from the very start, hey, this is what I do, and she's like, hey, I don't want to change you or anything like that. But it goes both ways. She's she likes to go to the gym and do like aerobic classes and things like that. And I try to be super supportive in her endeavors. She's a teacher, so she's done a lot of schooling to kind of get her master's and all that. So I was very supportive during that period where, I wasn't competing while she was trying to get her master's. So there's just it's a give and take. And again, it's like I've learned from, past history. And I think for us bodybuilders moving forward, like, because again, going back to what we first started about, like we were trying to optimize all the time early on and how stressful that can be. Like, don't fear the unknown. I think a lot of us fear the unknown, that insecurity of, hey, if I do 10 sets a week with this body part or 20 sets, what's more optimal? And we fear like what can happen. And it's like, just go full on and go in and find out for yourself what will happen, and be patient with it and assess it and make small revisions moving forward based off of what you're experiencing. And I think a lot of times it's like that insecurity is what kind of robs us of our enjoyment of the sport.
Yeah, and I think like right now I know a lot more about like the science and all this kind of stuff than I did even when I did my first prep with you back in 2016. And before that, I obviously know more than before that. But the funny thing is, like, when I was younger, I would try to have, like, after the show, I'd try to have, like, a perfect reverse diet. I'd do the kind of the Lane Norton style and use, like, the extra 15 grams of carbs every week until, 6 months later, you're back at your maintenance levels or something like that. And I would try to do something like that. And now this past like, month or 6 weeks or whatever it's been since I last finished my show, I literally haven't tracked a single macro. I haven't been like, on a seafood diet or anything like that, but I've just been really relaxed about my eating. I've gained probably more weight than I would like. I'm not like overly fat, but I really feel like that was like, it's like been a really good reverse for me because I'm feeling much better mentally. I think part of the tracking element, I think part of my recovery diet, like 3DMJ, like to coin it, is not tracking. That's part of my recovery. I think is just getting away from that, like not being so meticulous, because I have a fire to like compete again, like not next year because I obviously want to make progress, or probably not even the year after that. But in previous times I've done competitions, I was kind of burnt out afterwards. Like, I don't know if I'm going to compete in bodybuilding ever again. Maybe I will. I'm going to still lift and stuff, work out because I enjoy it, but I don't know if I'm going to do bodybuilding. But even now I'm like, I'm excited to like, I don't want to compete right away. Obviously, I still have a bit of the, the recovery aspect, hormones and stuff like that. I need to they need to come up and everything. And I don't want to get back into competing straight away. But I still have a fire to, I definitely want to compete in bodybuilding again. And I think this was like, on paper or in scientific terms, it was like suboptimal reverse. But for me, I feel like it was really, really good. And some people say, oh, you gained too much weight. You're supposed to gain 5% or whatever for the first few weeks of your body weight. But for me, I just, I started off with that 1 kilogram of candy that I ate in that store when we went shopping for your runners. That was the start of my reverse. And ever since then, I've just been like eating well, but just enjoying food and going out, eating out like a couple times a week. Training, I'm loving training. Sleep is getting better. I'm a lot more energetic. I know still got a long way to be fully recovered in terms of my hormones and libido and everything like that. But for me, looking back, if I was 5 years ago, I would have thought like, oh, that was awful. You've suboptimal. You didn't do what was the right way to do. You should have planned it meticulously, walked your calories up, and then you've gained too much body fat. But for me, I'm like this. I feel like it's the perfect reverse almost. If I was to do it again, would I do anything different? Probably not.
Yeah, it's I think, the reverse diet thing, it's like if you think about it, we're spending almost a year of our life, trying to get
Yeah.
extremely lean and to say, "Hey, Adam, your show's over, but here's 10 grams of carbs." It's like you're basically still dieting, so you're not just physically, you're going to continue to be limited, but like mentally and emotionally, it's like, how do you adhere to 10 grams of carbs when your hyper focused goal is now behind you? And so there's just like not very optimal, right? Like on paper, it once was, deemed, hey, reverse diet is optimal. Hey, you can, get your metabolism elevated, you stay in a leaner state, and you look great for all this time. But the reality is that you're still dieted, you're still in an extreme state physically, mentally, and emotionally, and it's not healthy. So yeah, it's like if you're a caveman in the ice age and, you're like 6% body fat and you're maintaining that through a reverse diet. Like in a sense, you're just kind of day to day, you're finding these little granules of food, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm eating these little granules. But when you come up to this large woolly mammoth, you think the caveman's going to be like, oh, I can only eat the granules on the ground? No, it's going to be like, hey, let me take a spear and kill that thing so I can eat the entire thing, because we need to get healthy again. You need to get that body fat put on. So I think it makes a lot of sense to have that candy after the show, right? Like to actually, put some calories back in us and actually get some body weight on us. Now, as far as like how much weight, the percentages and all that, like that's so individual. I know for me personally, like you, Adam, I've put on like 18 pounds already. Like I'm up almost, that's what, 8 kilos or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I have like a little bit of a gut again. And from aesthetic standpoint, it's definitely far from where I was at Worlds. But I feel so much better. I have so much more energy. I'm healthier. Like things are returning back to normal. My mood around my family is a lot better. And, again, that to me is far more important than trying to be like perfectly optimal with the bodybuilding side of things, as far as trying to reverse diet out and all these things. Like, and I think too, what I could probably speak for you on this one too, is that we both are pretty experienced now, so we can take comfort in knowing that, hey, let's say our body, like our aesthetics right now aren't exactly ideal, or maybe they're just a little, I think they're fine, but maybe they're not as ideal as we would like it. But we take comfort in knowing that, hey, we know how to get to the stage. We've done it. We've been there. We fulfill the potential. We know how to do it. So you can kind of relax a little bit knowing that, okay, we might not be 100% perfect in the moment, but eventually, because we are experienced, because we know how to work smart, we know how to be consistent, we know how to set up our goals and timelines that in the end, where we're on our next stop, I should say, our next destination, like in 2021 or 2022, whenever we decide to compete again, we know we're going to be okay.
Yeah, and I think it's not just the weight, because I'm sure you've done it in the past where it's just like you just gained a ton of weight post show, and I've seen many people do that. But it's like you need to gain the body weight back, but also you need time. So like if you're reversing really slowly and only gaining very small amounts, and I've even seen some competitors who've competed this season who have pride in that. And I mean, it is great that they have that diligence and that discipline to stay so regimented post show if that's what they want to do. But it's not just walking your calories slowly, because if you haven't got that body weight back on, or the body fat in particular, it doesn't matter how long you're reversing your calories back up. You need it's time plus body weight. So it's not just gain a shit ton of fat post show and then you're going to be all good, but it's not either just 6 months and you're going to be recovered, because in 6 months time, I think Eric said it, I think it might have been, I don't know if it was on a podcast or he said it to me in person, but I think it was maybe 09 or maybe after that, where he actually tried to, well, it couldn't be after 09 because he hadn't competed since then, but or maybe 11 or 2011, that he tried to maintain a lean level of body fat, and he just, like 6 months, 7 months post show, he still didn't feel normal. So it's like you need to get that initial weight on, but then I know, like at the body fat that I'm kind of at now, like getting any heavier is not really going to do me any justice. I'm just basically going to get fatter. I just need to I just need to kind of hold this weight and then just let time do its thing, and then I'll be recovered. Not just, well, I'm a little bit hungry, so I'll just keep eating until I'm like 210 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. Like I go back to 2014 and I'm like, okay, back then I was 43 and I was like, okay, I've trained for close to 30 years now. I can keep a leaner, like, quote unquote, as we get older, as we're more advanced, it's like in between your seasons, hey, let's stay leaner, right? Like that's kind of like the generalization out there. But for me personally, I'm like, okay, let me try that. Because in the past I've always kind of just let my weight go up, 20, 30 pounds. So like, let me stay 10 pounds, maybe 12 pounds over stage weight. And I did that. And I was basically in a sense kind of reverse dieting. And it was months after the show in 2014. And I was like, I still feel food focused. I'm still hungry in between meals, and it was just like I'm always thinking about the next meal, and my training really wasn't that productive. It was kind of like it was very stagnant, and just in general, I just didn't feel that great. I'm like, this makes absolutely zero sense for me, like to hang around 10 pounds over stage weight, even though I am older. It like makes no sense. So I just said, hey, let me eat more, and let me add some weight, and literally like 2 or 3 more pounds I put on, it was like, whoa, all of a sudden my training's improving, my recovery feels better, I'm not as food focused. It's amazing what a little bit more body fat will do. So, for me, like coming with this after this season, I know, okay, reverse dieting is not going to be the answer. Staying 10, 15 pounds over stage weight's not going to be the answer. But it's like you said, hey, let me put on enough weight to where it's going to be healthy for me and normal, but it's also going to mean I need to stay at this point for a given amount of time before I'm like fully recovered. Because still, I would say for me personally, like my sleep is dramatically improved, where it was very terrible at the end of prep. Like that's improved. I'm not as food focused. It's still a little bit, but not as much. And I have plenty of energy. My performance is skyrocketing in the gym, which I'm excited about. And I'm recovering really well, but I can tell like libido is not all the way there. So I know it's like, okay, I still need more time to settle in before I'm like fully recovered from 14 months of dieting. So it's gonna, like, if you think it takes 14 months of dieting getting to extreme levels of body fat, then yeah, it's going to take quite a bit of time afterwards to feel normal. Like we can't just expect like a month later you're going to feel like, oh yeah, I feel great, I'm normal again. It's going to take some time. So personally for me, it's like anywhere between, in the past it's usually like anywhere between 3 to 6 months where I feel kind of where I'm like, okay, yeah, this is more normal again.
Yeah, so it's probably going to be like springtime, right before you actually start to lay on any new muscle. Anything between then, it's really going to be just getting back to normal, regaining some lost size that you may have lost towards the tail end of prep, or just throughout that 14 months as every bodybuilder does. But what's the plan after that then? Are you trying to keep it a little bit tighter? Because 2021, like we're into 2020 like in a week's time, so 2021 you're going to be back on stage in like 18 months or something like that. So are you going to keep it tighter? I suspect you're not going to do a 14-month prep, because that means you've only got like 4 months left before you start prepping again.
No, we're not doing that again. So just so like the listeners of your show, like 14 months, it wasn't like hardcore dieting for 14 months straight. It wasn't linear. It was, a lot of refeeds, diet breaks, that type of thing, enjoying holidays, that. So I just don't want to give the impression like it was 14 months of hardcore dieting. But I definitely don't want to spend that long dieting, and in particular not spending more time in an extreme state as far as the level of leanness. I think both you and I were on the same trajectory and same path this season, where I think we were too lean for too long, and our last shows of the year we didn't look quite as good as we did at some of the earlier ones. So I know that's something I learned this season going into the next season. Okay, I need to game plan my shows and keep them within, a 2 to 3, like no more than 3 month stretch, like definitely probably within 2 months of, game planning when my shows are going to be. So this off season, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to, you won't see me mini cutting, there, even if I feel like I'm getting a little insecure about how I'm looking, I'm not going to mini cut. One, I definitely don't want to be in that state. I want to be as productive as possible with my training, so I don't want to take away from the big picture from that. And then two, again, my family just went through 14 months of prep. They don't need to go through 4 to 8 weeks of mini cutting. So to me, it just makes no sense from that sense. So the majority of 2020 will be kind of just, hey, I might gain a couple more pounds, and then we'll keep it 20 pounds over stage weight and train in that state the entire year. I would say probably somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe September, October. They'll go ahead and maybe do not a mini cut, but like a diet before the diet, like start cleaning things some up, some of them behaviors. Okay, Jeff, don't have that chocolate cake at night. Let's not do that. So just naturally let some of that weight come off. And then that's when I go to start the prep in 2021, I'm kind of thinking it'll be in January, and I'm thinking Muscle Mayhem in July. Like, things can change, but that's kind of my plan now, is like Muscle Mayhem in 2021 and maybe one other show after that. And to be honest, I'm not even thinking about Worlds right now as a target show, just because the experience of this last one, it was great that they had 360 athletes. It was awesome. It was probably the most competitive World show ever. But man, just like it, as you know, it wasn't, let's say, the most enjoyable day or experience as far as like the actual show itself. So,
I think Alberto summed it up pretty well. He was like, this seems like a refugee camp. There's just a load of bodies lying around everywhere in the back of like a school for hours.
Now in the WMBF's defense, they did say they're going to go to a two-day format. So I'm pretty sure they'll definitely improve the experience of the show. But for me right now, just like the way my mentality is around competing, I've done well. Like I've got my pro cards. I've placed top 5 at Worlds before. I've won pro shows. So it's more like I said earlier, I just want to have fun doing it. And at my age, that's what it's more about for me. So it doesn't matter if it's a local show or it's an NPC, not a drug tested show or whatever. Like, I just want to enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, share it with my family and friends on show day. And whatever stage I'm on, I just going to make the most of it regardless. So that's kind of like my mindset now.
Yeah, I think like I mirror what you said with regards to the length of the season probably just being a little bit too long. But I don't think I would have changed anything, because the mayhem is where it is in July, and the Worlds are in November, and there's nothing really you could change about that. And I try to talk to a few other coaches afterwards, not to try and rationalize anything, but just to try and figure out, like, what do you think actually went on? Like, I don't feel like I maybe looked as good, and I think it's something to do with just, when your hormones are so like messed up or suppressed, like insulin sensitive, you just don't peak as well. I think maybe we both kind of experienced that. You're just, no matter how much carbs you put in or how little carbs you put in, you kind of have maybe like a little bit of a flat look. And like you've kind of used the term coined the term a tired physique, and that's kind of what it is. And like, I don't think after the week after the show, after everything's kind of settled down, the placing is not really going to make that much difference. Like, if you came second rather than 4th or 6th or whatever, wouldn't really make a huge difference. So like, that's kind of a question I could ask myself again in the future. Is like, I would really love to do the mayhem again in the future in July, because like going out there is great. I love California, but also like the world is so far away. It's pretty hard to justify doing a season that long again, and towards the end of it, you start to lose mental steam. I spoke with Chris Barakat the other day, and he kind of said the same. Like, once you kind of get the level of conditioning and you stop kind of seeing new improvements or like significant improvements after a certain point, it's hard to keep the intensity of your training. It's hard to keep that enjoyment up, because you're just holding a condition that you just kind of feel like crap all the time. And to hold that for such a long period of time, it's hard to keep that intensity of your training up, and ultimately your physique kind of fades a little bit.
Yeah, it's like, an analogy would be like you're laying in the sun in extreme hot weather, and to a certain point, it's like, okay, I got my suntan, I need to get out of the sun now. It's like, no, you're just basically staying out there and getting cooked, and it's not pleasant anymore. So yeah, I mean, The only thing that kind of kept me going is the amount of shows I did. And it's not something I would recommend to other people. And I didn't game plan my season, hey, I'm going to do 7 shows. It kind of just fell into my lap as we were going along. Because the only show I was really targeting was Mayhem. I'm like, let me just do that show. And, that would have been the first time being on stage in 5 years. Prior to that, I got injured, so I never made it to the stage. So that was just like, hey, let me see if I can actually do this thing again. And things just started to fall into lap. I did pretty well at Mayhem. We went to another show, did well there. And then I had one of the promoters in the INBF contact me and say, hey, can you guest pose at my show? And it was like a week later. So I'm like, okay, let me do that. So basically things were just kind of falling into place. And if I didn't have those shows, I would say that looking in hindsight, the way I was kind of feeling, I wouldn't be surprised if I would have said, you know what, I'm just going to bypass Worlds this year. Because I was getting tapped out. Like you said, from July to November is such a long stretch, and to hold extreme conditioning, because I was in like my best condition in early September. So September, all like 2.5 month stretch, basically I had to hold conditioning. And I think, my body just started to get tired, and I got sick a couple times and things like that. We did some traveling, and I think it just took its toll. So by the time I got to Worlds, like I said, yeah, that coin phrase, I just had a tired look. Like, I didn't look terrible, but I didn't look the same either as I did in the beginning of September. And whether or not, hey, if I had that same package in September, if it would have helped placings or not at Worlds, I really don't know. I might have ended up being in the same place. So, and even if I did, let's say, move up 1, does it really, like you said, make a big difference as far as how I define that success? And I would say probably not. So.
Yeah, I think it's like I saw you on the morning of your show, and I think, yeah, you look great. And it was really hard for me to say that you didn't look better, because unless you compare yourself like from pictures to previous shows, you still look like it might be like a 2, 3, 4% difference, like, positive or negative, but that can make a difference, when you're up on the stage against other competitors who may have peaked for that show per se. Yeah. So they may have done like a qualifier, or they may have done well. And I kind of had the same experience with you. Well, my only goal was to do the Mayhem, and then I was just gonna like enjoy San Francisco after that. And it was like June, I think, when I actually put my application in to compete. And I think Bob or Tina, they emailed me and said, hey, did you get permission to do the show from the NBFI, which is the Irish kind of INBF? And I was like, oh, I didn't know I needed, because I'd never done bodybuilding show before. Like, I competed, but not in bodybuilding. So when I emailed them, they said, oh, you got to compete in September as well. So I was like, oh, well, that's my season getting extended. And then after that show, I was like, well, I got my Worlds invitation from the Mayhem, but I said I'm definitely not going to do Worlds in November, because I'm starting my Masters in September. And I just don't want to die for that long. And then after I did that show and I did well, I was like, oh, I kind of feel a little bit obliged to, or not obliged, but I felt like, I'll just give it a shot. But between then and November, it's just like the enjoyment just kind of went out of it, and I don't regret doing it. I mean, like, I'm here to tell the tale. I still live, but I mean, I don't think I would have. I don't know if I'd do the same thing. Like you said, I might skip Worlds and just hold out for Worlds in a few years' time, when perhaps it can be maybe more competitive, or just peak per se for that show.
Yeah, it kind of like, too, the conversation I had with Alberto when he was coaching me in 2014. We did the Pro International, and it was in the middle of September. And I won that show. That was my first ever pro win. It was a big show. It's at the time, one of the more prestigious shows. And I was like, okay, now if we do Worlds, it's a 2-month stretch. It's like 8 or 9 weeks more to diet. And I definitely needed to maybe lose a couple more pounds to get that conditioning. And Alberto just said, hey, Jeff, you know what? You just won one of the best natural bodybuilding shows out there. There's nothing for you to prove. You could let's just shut the season down. Because I think he was being protective of me, knowing that I have a family, and it meant, okay, 9 more weeks of going through that process. Like, it's not an easy thing to do. It puts a lot of strain, not just on the bodybuilder, like we've been talking about everybody around you. And he was just like, hey, there's, you accomplished, a lot. There's nothing else to prove right now. But I decided, hey, let's just go through it. We pushed through it, and we ended up doing it. And it's kind of the same thing this season. like I said, if I didn't have those shows in between, I probably would have just said I'm done. Because to go from the middle of September to November, like that was rough. And to not have, let's say, those little hyper-focused goals along the way, I probably would have tapped out. So I just know for future, and with a lot of the athletes that I coach, that I think, I think my perspective's changing a little bit. When they want to have these long drawn out seasons, it's like, hey, this is the pros and cons of it. Of course, it's always up to the athlete, their decision as far as what they want to do. And I support it as long as it's healthy. But it's like, okay, now I have a little more perspective. I can offer like, okay, here's the pros, here's the cons. So it helps them make, informed decisions.
Yeah. So final question, Jeff. What advice would you give to somebody, I wouldn't even say yet necessarily a younger person, because it could be anybody at any age that wants to get into competitive bodybuilding, but also wants to be successful but have a sustained career? Because I don't think people don't bodybuild just when they initially do it. They obviously want to do well, but they also want to do it multiple times. They don't want to just be like a one and done, or at least that's not what they want to do when they're initially going into it. That happens often after the first show. People are like, I'm done, that's it, because they don't have the best experience. But for somebody who wants to be successful, like from a competitive point of view, which is like yourself, you're pro natural bodybuilding, you've done very, very well over the years, but also have a sustained career, because not many have been around as long as you and been successful. What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think, man, that's such a hard question, right, to kind of try to answer in a short period of time. But I would say the main thing is that to have fun. Like, that's the main thing. It's like, have fun in what you're doing, and understand that you're never going to be perfect. You can strive for perfection, but you're never going to be perfect. And the thing is it's more about the consistency, and how, like, for me personally, it's like, how have I been able to be consistent this whole time? And I think the big takeaway is, yes, like, of course we all want to be optimal, but the reality is that it doesn't exist in a sense. It's like, so what I've learned, that practicality leads to sustainability. So what you're doing, if it's practical, it works well, in the gym, it works well outside the gym, how things impact, like what you do outside the gym will impact inside the gym, and vice versa. So if you're practical, it's going to lead to sustainability. And if you're sustaining, no doubt you're going to make progress. And again, I can look back at all of my career, like all of the off seasons that I've had in between shows, and there wasn't one season where I didn't improve. Like, yeah, sure, there's been some off seasons that have been a little bit more fruitful than others, but I've improved every single year. And the reason I can say I've improved is because I've been consistent. So that's what's key, is just like, it's so cliche, right? Just be consistent. But just realize that you're never going to be perfect. And I always say it's probably best to be conservative. So whatever structure you have, start conservative and assess and revise as you go. And don't fear mistakes, learn from them, and just keep moving forward and enjoy your process.
Awesome, thank you for that. So where can we find more about you, Jeff?
Instagram. So Instagram, 3DMJ Godfather. Also, you guys can go to 3dmusclejourney.com.
Great. So on the future is on the cards for the future is Bodybuilding Show 2021, Muscle Mayhem. We're going to see you there.
That's the game plan for now. Yeah, I'll definitely be there, and I'll be turning 50 years old when I'm on that stage. So yeah, half a century, according to how Eric likes to coin it.
You're not going to be doing any strongman or weightlifting in the off season like Eric?
No, man. I think if I did that, I might snap. So I got to stay healthy, man. But no, my passion is bodybuilding. It's been bodybuilding, and that's what I basically gravitate towards.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff, for coming on and giving us all your wisdom and knowledge from all the years that you've been in this sport and coaching people.
More than welcome, Adam. And yeah, let's go eat some more candy.
So hopefully you found this episode with myself and Jeff pretty useful, or at least enjoyable in some form or another. I personally learned a lot from Jeff over the last few years, especially how to take things slow, or to enjoy the process more so than trying to be perfect in any given moment, because that's the kind of person that I am. I really enjoy the science and the studies and trying to optimize everything. And while I still do enjoy that stuff, I think I've learned to understand that that is of secondary importance to being consistent and enjoying the process, which is ultimately going to lay the foundations of a long-term future in bodybuilding, whether it's competitive or just recreational. And ultimately that is what's going to give you the long-term results and get you to where you want to go. And I think Jeff is a testament to that. When people ask him, what's his secret is basically 33 years of training. And you don't often see people who've been in the game as long as he has, because they either burn out mentally from just trying to go too fast or too hard too fast and go all in, or else they burn out because they don't train in a way that allows them to have longevity in this sport or pursuit or whatever you want to call it. So if you want to learn more about Jeff, all the links are down in the show notes, and if you want to ask me any questions or reach out to me, you can get me in the show notes as well. But I hope you enjoy listening to this, and I will catch you in another episode when we will have on more and great guests, as we always do. So please do, again, leave some form of rating, review, or feedback, good or bad, hopefully good, and I would really appreciate that. So thanks again, guys, and I will chat to you in the next show.